Hey, Raptors family, welcome to the It's a Raptors Ting podcast. This is your host, the Scholar Baller, and let's get right down to it. It's episode 4, entitled 100 Miles and Running. So, many of you might be wondering why I titled this episode 100 Miles and Running, and according to my dad joke humor, and figuring that I'd go sort of the old school route with referencing old school hip hop tracks. A lot of people, they should know by now that, runs in basketball is like a slang term for pickup basketball. And I just kind of felt like since the topic of today's, or rather the topic of this week's video would really be circulated around what happened at the Rico runs, I figured that's what I'd go with. So there it is, 100 miles and running. Speaking of that, I don't really want us as a fan base to get too carried away with the Rico runs. I think a lot of us learned our lessons from last year, with playoff P or prognostication P, trying to make these prophetic predictions that don't seem to come true. And unfortunately, he gave us that prognosis curse that he's so widely known for. Prognosis, Paul George, playoff P, a lot of P's. But with that in mind, it's like he gave us that curse by talking all that mess about, I'd be surprised if the Raptors don't come out the gate swinging. And I mean, hey, the Raptors last season, they came out the gate swinging and they tripped and fell down and broke their chin. Okay, like this is so with that lesson in mind, I just want to really zone in and say, like, I saw some things at the Rico runs this time around. I believe the Raptors had 2 teams there, and they had mostly a lot of young guys. And they had some guys who we don't really know as well. Maybe they're trying to make the G League team, but they also had some of the more notable faces, at least some of the more notable faces that I saw. Of course, Pascal Siakam was there, which was interesting to see. Pascal Siakam is definitely one of the veterans on our team, so it's nice that you have a veteran linking up with some of the younger prospects like Grady Dick and Marquise Noel. And it's nice to see them, get their action, and they seem to be fluid out there on the court. But I think I need to start drawing some lines in the sand in terms of really setting the discourse here. The Rico runs, like, they're a fun watch. Heck, they're even like a nice thing to have on in the background. If you're doing something else and you just kind of have the runs playing on the background, that's cool and all. But at the end of the day, the Rico runs don't directly translate to NBA level success, and that's something that I think we as a basketball culture, we as a Raptors culture, if you will, we need to really start to move away from that. If anything, like, the Rico runs sort of equivocates to, at least in my opinion, it equivocates to semi-pro competition. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of semi-pro / pro-am competition going around. It's a thing that happens in the summer, and that's great. But ultimately, even though I liked what I saw in the runs, the main thing is we got to be focused on what's going to happen next season. And quite frankly, I was actually glad that, when I compare and contrast the Rico runs footage from last summer to this summer, I'm glad that ultimately not very many Raptors were there by comparison. I think that's good. I think the summers are a time where it's very important for players to spend a lot of time with themselves, building on particular skill sets, doing that, getting in the lab and doing that one-to-one training with the trainer, working on specific things that the team wants you to work on. I really think like that's where the real work is. And that's not to say that you can't show up at the Rico runs or you can't show up and do any runs. Like, I think that's cool, but the fact that most of the Raptors, like, we didn't, as far as I know, I don't think I really recall seeing Scotty there this year, which is, again, like, I'm happy that, he wasn't there. And ultimately, that's a good thing. It's a good thing. You know, the Raptors, they're going to have a new coach this year, Darko Rajakovic, and, they're really going to be in this position to where they're going to have to show what they can do for this team, because a lot of the things that were in place, it's not that they won't build upon it, but they've done, like, for the most part, they've done a total reconstruction and reconfiguration of the Raptors coaching staff. So we can just expect, like, a different philosophy, a different approach, different schemes. And now that the deck is being reshuffled, guys got to really put in that off-season work to show that they deserve a role. There isn't going to be any swinging off of coattails from last season. I mean, as a matter of fact, you wouldn't really want to swing off last season's coattails anyways, because that was abysmal. But it's just one of those situations where, I think Pascal's role will look similar, but I think with Scotty Barnes, he's going to have an opportunity to show that he's added some new dimensions to his game. I'm really hoping that he really takes it up to another notch, fulfilling that point forward role. And, I'm looking for him to, at times I want him to bring up the ball, but mostly I'm looking for him to operate out of the high post, the low post area, the mid-range extended. And to be honest, I'd like to see him do a lot of passes inside the paint, that big-to-big pass, like passing it off to Siakam, who's cutting to the basket for a slash, or lobbing it up to Jakob Poeltl. I think that would be, a great strategy there. Just little things like that. But ultimately, I'm happy with where I think the team is going to go. I don't really have full-blown expectations for this upcoming season, but the only thing I can really say is that I do have a quiet confidence that I think they will do better than they did last season. Well, that's it for this week's episode 4. Just thought I would do a little light work, sharing my thoughts on the infamous Rico runs and just a little bit of what I expect for next season. Saying it's a Raptors ting, like, comment, and subscribe.